Hello Evgeny, how are you doing today?
Hi, Christophe, really great.
So I'm glad we managed to catch up. It's almost last minute. We're on day 3 of Money2020 Asia in Singapore. How did the event go for you and ClauseMatch?
Well, the event has been great for us. We came here as part of British mission by the Department of International Trade. They signed a bridge some time ago with the Singaporean government on FinTech. And actually Britain has been bringing really prominent FinTech startups and RegTech startups on these missions to actually help them to expand to new countries. And Singapore is certainly one of our primary markets that we're actually expanding to this year.
Exactly. My next question would be, we'll talk about the organization but we can even start there. It's even better. So if we step back, we'll talk about Singapore in a second, but if somebody doesn't know about ClauseMatch, which is probably unlikely to happen, but what is ClauseMatch and what value there is in partnering with you for a financial institution?
So ClauseMatch is a regulatory technology company. We help banks to digitize their compliance workflow internally. And we provide tools to actually manage compliance and manage regulatory obligations in order for a bank to be able to show to regulators and actually to the board of the bank as well that they're compliant with regulatory obligations applicable to them.
So, I mean, RegTech or RegTech and compliance and GDPR and all those themes and topics are, of course, very hot. There's a lot of companies targeting, that market as well. So, again, any key USPs of ClauseMatch, whether it's the solution itself, algorithms you put in play, to be even smarter. So, could you please share a bit more about that?
Well, one thing that we've done is it's a unique way to digitize compliance knowledge and compliance content, whether these are internal policies and procedures or controls or regulatory obligations. But digitizing that part of the knowledge within the bank allows us to actually use advanced technologies like machine learning, natural language processing, and a general AI type of technology to understand how an obligation which is applicable to a bank is addressed by a bank and whether there are contradicting statements within the bank's compliance content, which goes against the regulation.
Okay, that's fascinating. You talked about AI a second ago and machine learning, so is it something which is already available to your clients, or are you about to release maybe?
Yeah, so we have been experimenting quite a lot with AI technologies. There was a recent breakthrough last year made by some of the bigger AI companies in terms of the methodology of how to apply natural language processing. And in fact, we have been testing that the new methodology on regulatory content and banking content, and we're getting some great results in terms of the machine being able to understand regulatory text. And we are actually actively implementing that with 2 banks, and we're getting some great results.
So soon, hopefully, that will be like in production client side. Yes, so that's an exciting advancement. 2 banks, are they UK based? Those 2 banks?
So one I can definitely disclose is, of course, Barclays.
Okay.
We have signed them as a client some time ago. We have been working together, but that gave us the insight in terms of what global bank would actually need to bring their compliance to the 21st century. Another bank is a digital bank, Revolut, which is growing exponentially and expanding to many countries. We're helping them with their compliance program since November last year.
It's not too bad for references, indeed. Like it's pretty decent,
Yeah.
So we talked about those 2 banks, so a neobank as such, and an established bank, which is one of the most innovative, forward-thinking banks, by the way, Barclays. So again, I'm not surprised they partner with the right partner for RegTech. We're in Singapore. You mentioned that was really important markets for you, the Asian market. So again, could you please tell us more about that? I believe that sooner than later, you'll have some kind of presence in Singapore to cover the Asian market?
Yeah, absolutely. We're absolutely dedicated to this market. We actually just hired someone who will be representing us in Singapore. I'm also spending more and more time here. So over the course of this year, we will expand our presence in Singapore. In fact, we're seeing a lot of potential, not just in Singapore, but in Southeast Asia itself. It's an extremely diverse market. There is the regulatory environment is evolving here as well, and we're seeing a lot of potential to actually help banks not to adopt legacy solutions, but actually leapfrog even some of the banks which, some of the banks in Europe and US by adopting something new and not having to fix old legacy issues.
So hence, the appetite or the right moment to be here, basically, and sooner than later, starting to increase brand awareness, building the pipeline, and again, closing more clients that side of the world. Yeah. Which again, congratulations, all the best for that. That seems like an exciting mission or journey. We talked about Europe. That's where you're headquartered in London. We talk about Russia maybe one day, news your home country. Then we talk about Asia because we're in Singapore. What about the US then? I've heard that you might also go there at some point, maybe in the near future.
So we are exploring US market. We're actually starting to work with some of the US banks. Obviously, these banks are global, and the regulatory pressure in the US is also constantly increasing. Even though we are potentially in a deregulation in the US, the enforcement actions are not stopping. So you still need to showcase that you're compliant with regulations and that your compliance programs are adequate for the regulations which are applicable to you. So US is definitely a market we're looking at, and in fact we're probably going to expand there by the end of this year, early next year.
So I feel sorry if you have to spend so much more time in New York or somewhere that night. It feels horrible. I'm just kidding, of course.
I think it's a tough choice, Singapore and New York. I love both cities.
I think you're London, Singapore, New York. You made it, or you will make it soon. It's an amazing situation to be in. Talking about the US very, very quickly, there's the California Act, which will come into play soon. Any impact or in terms of appetite for your solutions or challenges for US banks as to deal with that?
So I think it just highlights the trend that there is one major regulation like GDPR, and then other regulators take notice, and similar regulations come out in all parts of the world. So I think regulatory change is a global, I guess not phenomenon, but a global development, which will happen over time in Southeast Asia and different US states as well. So there is more and more appetite for compliance solutions today. And in fact, that's something that we have been seeing for a while, hence why we created the platform, because the role of compliance and compliance people in banks and in global institutions has changed in the last 10 years. We are seeing increased regulation, increased scrutiny, increased, emphasis on the conduct within organizations, and conduct is actually very, very difficult to enforce or change. And the role of compliance is actually to affect that change on the organization, but they don't have tools which will help them, and that's why RegTech is on the rise, and that's why compliance solutions are on the rise, because the role has changed and the environment has changed as well.
You mentioned conduct, so do you have some kind of special relationship with the Financial Conduct Authority? I guess you're engaged with them. In the UK, for instance, is there a clear route to market for you to build trust, awareness, and relationships with those authorities all over the world?
Absolutely. So we were part of FCA's tech sprint, second tech sprint, where we actually showcased our solution integrated with the FCA handbook and how it could work with FCA, with FCA's rules. Integrated directly into internal banking systems and internal banking governance structure. So that was one thing we did, but then there were others. So for example, we're part of Sandbox with one of the global banks working together with FCA in terms of how the ecosystem between the regulator and the regulated banks and other financial institutions could work together.
Okay. Because I would have thought for you it's a natural place to be in and the relationships to build, and that would help drive awareness and again customer acquisition, hopefully. There's so many more questions, but we got limited time, and again I'm grateful we're spending already so much time together here in Singapore. So maybe the last question is more like would you mind sharing, if you can, just a bit of your extensive experience building a successful startup in FinTech, already 5-6 years, which is a long time in that world, right? And working from the get-go or pretty early with an accelerator from Barclays, for instance, I believe, yeah? Yep. So if you can share just that, how much that helped you, and it's not a plug for Barclays, by the way, even though we like them and Rise. So how helpful was it, and do you recommend your fellow FinTech entrepreneurs to adopt such a similar route to market?
I think definitely accelerators help. So for example, for us an accelerator was a pivotal point for the company, because usually when you start out the company you have a great idea and you're working on the product. An accelerator makes you and helps you think not just in terms of the product but also in terms of the business. How do you get the adoption of your product? And in FinTech, especially if you are selling to big banks, it's extremely difficult to do that. So when you start thinking about the business and how you actually work with these big banks and how you get them to buy from an innovative but small startup, that was something of extreme value to us from the accelerator.
The insight on, as such, as from a bank standpoint, and what would appeal to them and how you can match those expectations or those needs. And as we know, even if you're the best startup in the world, some of the largest banks may struggle, like partnering with a startup in London, whereas they're on the West Coast in the US, and we know that, but I think you're doing very well. So again, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup pour votre temps. All the best for the future, but I think it's bright, especially as early as 2019 with your international expansion. And again, I feel very sorry for you that you have to choose between London, New York, and Singapore. So thank you very much, Privet, and hopefully we'll see each other soon on the FinTech Power 50 TV channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christophe.